Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. My name is Margaret Leinen. I'm the director of Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and I have the pleasure of moderating this panel on one of the UN Ocean Decade challenges, unlocking ocean-based solutions to climate change. And I think for all of us here, especially in the Ocean Pavilion, the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainability has really been a transformative development. It's something that we can see reverberating through the discussions here and also reverberating through discussions in the climate COP itself. And earlier this year, there was a United Nations Ocean Decade Conference in Barcelona. And during that conference, the UN Decade unveiled a document called Vision 2030, which was made up of white papers on each of the 10 challenges that are part of the UN Decade. And so this session is going to focus on one of those, the one most closely related to the COP, unlocking ocean-based solutions to climate change. And we have a great group that has joined us to discuss this. First is Robert Hadenbach, who is the Global Director of Climate and Nature at Fugro. We have Julien Barbier, who is going to be online, and he is the Chief of the Marine Policy and Regional Coordination Section of the IOC and Global Coordinator of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. We also have Rama. Rama needs no introduction to anyone at the Ocean Pavilion. No, he's the director of the Marine Policy Center and senior advisor to the president of Woods Hole Oceanographic on ocean and climate policy. Lauren Calderwood, who is the head of global engagement and thought leadership at Ørsted, and Evgenia Kostinaya, who is the ECOP, that's the Early Career Ocean Professionals Program Global Coordinator, part of the Ocean Decade community. So this group is going to give us an overview of the challenges and how they relate to the COP here. So we're going to start out by turning to Julien. And Julien, are you online? There. Great to see you if you're only online.
Yes. Good to see you, Margaret.
Yes. So could you provide some more context on the Ocean Decade Vision document? How does this fit into the framework of the Ocean Decade? And why is it important? How did it develop? Who was involved? And tell us anything else you want to about the process of generating Ocean Vision 2030.
Thank you very much, Margaret, and thank you to our colleagues from Fugro for organizing this event. Fugro has been a long-standing partner of the Decade, so it's great that they are also championing some of our very important issues in the framework of the Decade. So indeed, you've kind of set the scene, and I will add a little bit to this. But the Decade is has emerged as a global framework, really focusing on addressing critical knowledge gaps that we have in the ocean. And the way we do this is really by bringing together diverse actors, from the science generators, the science users, to co-design and co-deliver solutions oriented research that is going to help countries to move forwards with many areas, including, of course, in the domain of climate change, and particularly with focus on adaptation and mitigation. In the last 4 years, the Decade has become a global movement which is really fast-tracking knowledge generation, but also dissemination and the use, because it has also a focus on really systematically approaching ocean science around partnership, around the engagement of end users. And so far we have 56 global programs that have been established, 440 projects which are working together around common objectives, and they are using the 10 decade challenges to really focus and prioritize their work. but also working in synergies through a coordinated ecosystem. And I think this is really the biggest value proposition of a decade, and that is this notion of co-design and cooperation and coordination working together around some of those issues. We're also working through collaborative centers and institutions around the world who have expertise and leading the development of actions in the particular area. So as I've mentioned, the first 4 years of a decade were very much almost an organic process with the growth from many actions coming together and generating this knowledge. And this is why about a year ago we discussed this with the Decade Advisory Board, and when you were there, Margaret, in that group. But really the need to start to also focus on developing a common vision for the remaining part of a decade. And particularly really trying to understand what do we mean in terms of strategic ambitions for each of our 10-decade challenges. And within that, and I think we have a slide, by the way. I'm not sure if you have the slide on your side, but there's a couple of slides that were provided by the organizers. I'm not sure if those are moving along, but I hope they are. And within that strategic ambition, really understand also what are the milestones, the targets that exactly, thank you very much, that we need to achieve for really ensuring success of a decade by the end of by 2030. So that also means looking at some of the priority areas in terms of science, in terms of capacity development, in terms of partnerships and resources, which are of course essential elements to achieve those goals. So we launched this process in May 2023, and let's go maybe to the next slide, and established 10 working groups, one for each of the 10 decade challenges, and really brought into those groups, of course, the scientific expertise and some of the leading actions that are working under those specific challenges, but also trying to bring in end users and also experts, thematic experts into this. In total, we brought about 150 experts that worked into that framework over a 1-year period. And we really asked them to focus on some of those key issues or questions that I highlighted. What does success look like by the end of a decade for each of the 10 decade challenges? And how do we get there, particularly in terms of investment, partnership, but also innovation and technologies that really can underpin the advancements of those 10 decade challenges. The end result of that process is indeed a set of white papers, and maybe let's go to the next slide, which were basically feeding the discussion that we had in Barcelona at the Decade Conference. And those 10 white papers are going to be actually published also in specific journals. And they were also synthesized in the framework of this Vision 2030 report, which is this report that you can see in the middle of the slide here, which was actually just finalized a few weeks ago, because we actually, after Barcelona, we also worked and synthesized further and took also on board the recommendations we heard in Barcelona to come up with this final document, which I think is going to be a very strategic document for the remainder of a decade. And within this document are a number of important areas. One of them, it was the need to refine the decade challenges, because those were actually set actually around 2019, 2020, and through regional workshops. And at the time when those were set, of course, the ocean governance landscape was very different. And the decade has the ambition to really respond to policy demand and provide scientific knowledge. And for example, at the time, we didn't have a BBNJ. We didn't have a global biodiversity framework when we set those decade challenges. So it was important to somehow revisit them, adapt them a little bit to some of the new issues that we are seeing within the ocean space. Let's go maybe to the next slide because I think I'll start to focus maybe a bit more on some of our high level messages. And within that, we looked at the priorities for each of the decade challenges, but also looked at priorities across challenges because we do not want to work in silos, and we know that a lot of decade actions that are focusing on climate, for example, have potentially very important aspect related to biodiversities. Same with pollution. We know that pollution also has impacts with human health. So we also wanted to ensure that we could really identify what are those bridges between the different type of issues, and really also focus on where we need to advance the science and where we need to generate new decade actions. So just to maybe wrap up, I want to highlight some of the high-level messages that emerge through that process, particularly in the domain of the ocean climate nexus, which I think is what we're discussing here today. Maybe five, high-level headers. The first one on the need to generate knowledge to better understand the technical, the ecological, but also the social feasibility related to marine carbon dioxide removal initiatives. We know it's a hot topic. There's a lot of media attention to those areas, and this is really where we need authoritative science to look at potential for scaling up, but also to inform any monitoring, verification, or regulatory frameworks that may emerge in the future. So that's one. Another, I think, key area is in relation to deep sea ecosystems, and really understand how habitats and species are connected, but also acquiring better knowledge in terms of vulnerability assessment vis-a-vis the climate change and human impacts, and that may occur in those areas. A third area which came up very strongly is the need to rapidly scale up climate mitigation through marine renewable energies and the management of coastal ecosystems. So again, an area for which the decade should also come up with authoritative actions to support those processes within the national frameworks, but also at the international level. A fourth area that came very strongly is the need to have adaptive governance and management systems which are really supported by vulnerability and risk to coastal communities and marine industries. So a very strong focus on coastal resilience in particular, and the need to develop climate change adaptation pathways into local adaptation strategies. And of course, this is particularly important within the framework of the UNFCCC, when we have the national determined contributions process ongoing, and particularly in 2025 with this deadline for bringing those into the picture, and of course having ocean-based solutions that are supporting NDCs is going to be a key area. And I think this is an area where the decade can also deliver a lot of potential guidance to member states. And I'll just finish with one more, which I think came up very strongly in this working group on climate, and this is the need to bring sustainable and climate resilient aspects into ocean economy, and in particular looking at ocean planning, marine spatial planning processes, mainstreaming climate dimensions within those to ensure that we can really integrate environmental conservation and socioeconomic benefits for local communities. So those are some of the key areas, but the Vision 2030 process also looked at cross-cutting recommendations, and that's really, what kind of enabling conditions do we need to deliver these new or those knowledge priority areas? So it's not just the what, but also the how. And those touched upon on, sustaining, expanding sustained financing and resourcing, of course, which is essential, moving from the science limitation in terms of funding from, going from a project to project into a more sustained financing and type of services. Looking at the engagement of industry and innovation sectors, I think was a strong message. And also the role of national and regional international policy frameworks as drivers of priority science and knowledge generation through the decade. So what do we do with all of those high-level recommendations as we look forward to the next years of the decade? I think our task now is really to translate those priorities into global actions. And to do that, we need to work with the ecosystem of the decade, which includes regional task forces, national decade committees, the decade collaborative centers. So we really can translate that into national priorities and strategies. But also we need to leverage the decade framework and the call for decade actions to generate new decade actions that are going to address some of those priority areas. So we will be doing this, and we are working with member states. We're working, with those international frameworks to also generate new flagships initiatives that can really generate this much needed knowledge and to advance and particularly facilitate transfer of technologies and the capacity development of member states to be able to use that knowledge for example, for climate adaptation and mitigation. So I hope, Margaret, this gives us a bit of a overview for other speakers to then come in and also give their perspective on where do they see the decade added value and what are some of the challenges and opportunities that we have ahead of us to deliver this very important knowledge. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Great. Thank you, Julian. And for those of you who don't know Julian and his co-worker, Alison Clausen, are really they're the machine behind the UN decade. They are the reason that it actually keeps working and keeps working so smoothly. So thanks for that overview. I think it was really, not only was it very clear, but it was also very precise. And that's going to help us with this discussion. So now we're going to turn to Robert. And one of the recommendations in this set of priorities was to ensure the strategic ambition is fulfilled and success is achieved by increasing research into expanding vegetated coastal ecosystems, which will enable global scale implementation. And we've heard about this before in terms of blue carbon and the importance of that. So can you speak to innovative technologies and methodologies being used to map and monitor these systems? And how do those support the scalability of this? And maybe you could start, for people that aren't familiar with FUGRO, by telling us a little bit about FUGRO too.
Thank you very much, Margaret. And you might wonder what a private company is doing as part of the Ocean Decade. Because FUGRO is a private company, we have been mapping the oceans for the last 63 years with our vessels, aircraft, satellites. And why are we part of the Ocean Decade? Because we feel that we can contribute, but we also feel there's an opportunity in the ocean. We all know, I don't need to tell here what the importance of the ocean is in light of climate change, in light of the biodiversity degradation. And hence also the theme here that we're talking about in ecosystem restoration. But maybe a little bit about FUGRO. So 12,000 people, we're all over the world. We are specifically historically looking at the infrastructure that has been built in the oceans. We have vessels running through the oceans. But since 10 years ago, actually, when the MH370, you all recall the Malaysian Airlines that disappeared in the Indian Ocean, we were the ones commissioned to look for it. And in the process, we collected 120,000 square kilometers of data of an area that was never explored. We did not find MH370, unfortunately, otherwise you would have heard about it and we would have had a lot better branding, I think, than we have at the moment within FUGRO. But we did collect a lot of very valuable data that's actually used up till this day by academics. And we contributed the data to seabed 2030. And in light of that, we joined the Ocean Decade because we felt we can contribute, but we can also engage with a wide range of stakeholders that are needed to find solutions for our oceans in the future. And I think this panel is exemplary of that. You see academics at this panel, you see intergovernmental agencies represented by Julian and his team, other private companies. So all stakeholders are here to make things possible. Then if I turn to your question about the technology that we need. So first of all, let me tell you, most of the technology is actually there and has been used for other applications for years and years. And that's also the data that we contribute and that we try to disclose via the Ocean Decade. So we're actively looking at private companies, like for example Ørsted, who's on this panel as well, to support the academic community to share data for the common good. Most technologies are there, but certainly when you look at biodiversity, it becomes a little bit more complex. Climate is relatively easy in the sense you have a few parameters that we're looking at. It's very dimensional, the effects of climate change. If you look at the coastal zone, for example, it's still pretty much rocket science. But if you go into biodiversity and you look at different species, and you look at the health of species, it becomes a lot more complicated. Technologies that are currently being used by ourselves and by academics are from very high scale satellite imagery. And I'm not talking about like regular satellite imagery processing. No, I'm talking about satellite-derived bathymetry and satellite-derived habitat mapping that can happen under the sea. So you can use images, and we have patented algorithms to look at what the different habitats are under the sea or on the sea floor. So from that level up to what we call LiDAR technology. So this is technology from an aircraft or from a drone or from any other platform airborne, where we collect very high accurate data of an area, where we can say this is the morphology of the area. This is the risks that we have towards the coast from a climate point of view, from an extreme weather point of view, and from a sea level rise point of view. But also the biodiversity elements that we need to know more and more about. Then we have technologies like eDNA that look at the different species that are around. Look at the degradation or the flourishing of those species in areas. And then you go all the way to, at this moment in time, divers doing spectral images of the sea floor, and this will help to actually prove some of the higher skilled technologies. And what is important, why I talk about skill all the time, is because if we want to have real impact in the ocean space, it's a big space, we need to move away from these small pilots, small startups that are doing postmark type of projects. And we need to look at how can we scale this? How can we scale this with the use of satellites, with the use of aircraft, with the use of vessels? And when we use vessels and we use aircraft, let's use the least harming ones. So, for example, the development of uncrewed surface vehicles that go on solar panels. So this is a way that we can contribute with our geodata efforts to do good while not doing any harm. So two projects that I would like to just throw out here is and just to show that this is really happening. So this is not in an ideation stage. There's actually governments spending hundreds of millions of euros at the moment to do ecosystem restoration with these kind of technologies. And 2 days ago we were in a panel here and I spoke about the Italian project, 400 million going into ecosystem restoration of the whole of Italy using this type of technologies from the land-based problems up to the deepest sides of the Mediterranean. Another example is mangroves. Mangroves are a gift that keep on giving. They're a solution to a lot of our issues, both on the biodiversity side and on the climate side. So what we're looking at together with Cook University at the moment in Queensland is how do you map mangroves in a way that is non-destructive, that can be done at scale again. So we can do the whole of Queensland. And I don't know if you know how big Queensland is, but if you project it on Europe, it would be covering, I think, half of it. So it's really about scale, and it's really about moving that scale into these projects. And then disseminating that data for multiple use. So not using it once, because this is what we see with the governments we work with as well. The people commission once a project, they don't monitor it over time, and data gets lost, or data sits at one department's desk and doesn't cross to other silos. So we also help our clients to find multiple use cases of this data and enduring value of the data. And if you look at it then, actually data collection is not that expensive. We just have to build a business case. So that's me, Margaret.
Great, thank you, Robert. And actually the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development from the beginning said that business and the private sector had to be part of the decade. And Fugro has been an amazing partner to a lot of projects, and thank you very much. So, Rama, one of the recommendations identified that was to ensure the strategic ambition was to ensure that controlled field testing of marine carbon dioxide removal is co-designed and implemented with invested communities, and that it's modeled and monitored as an input to future policy frameworks. So I know you have been in several sessions here concerning marine carbon dioxide removal. So can you talk a little bit about the co-design of projects and how you see these feeding into policy frameworks?
Thank you very much, Margaret, and I want to thank Fugro for organizing this session and for inviting me to be part of it. I will answer your question, Margaret, but please allow me to say a little bit about why the ocean decade and why this particular theme, Priority 5, and why we are here in the Ocean Pavilion with you as an organizer and with Fugro as a partner and many other partners that are sitting in the audience. The ocean community was interested in, obviously, the ocean matters and looked at the Law of the Sea Convention as a constitution, for the ocean. That was adopted in 1982, and it's now 42 years. And there is lots of institutions that are established, but those institutions and the convention are not integrated in a manner that really capitalizes on what ocean has to offer to the Sustainable Development Agenda. Climate Convention, we are here at the Conference of the Parties meeting, and the convention had very little to say about this going back to 92. And the same is true with 97. And even the Paris Climate Agreement, the mention that we see is in the preamble part of it. So if we believe that ocean has a lot to contribute to climate stabilization, the question is, how do we proceed with it? And the reason the Ocean Pavilion came into existence is really to present that connection. Now, the Ocean Decade is, the kind of thing that we do in the United Nations is to come up with these decadal priorities. And so when that Ocean Decade was declared in 2021.
19. It was approved in 19.
Sorry?
Approved in 19.
Okay, right. I have to wear this. Okay. So it is remarkable because in that decade announcement, they have tried to look at it in a more comprehensive manner. And climate is a central part of it, as we see from the theme 5, that is, there is an ocean's role in climate solutions. So it is, first of all, that acknowledgement is one that brings the ocean closer to not only the Sustainable Development Agenda, but particularly to goals 13, which is climate, 14, the ocean, and 15, land. And so we have that kind of a connection. And the scientific community, as you know, Margaret, has been aware of this issue and has been working on it for quite some time. But now we are living in a different world in a manner of speaking. There's a lot of technology, as Robert had talked about. The development is key in terms of our ability to move forward with it. And my institution, my colleagues in the institution, by the way, I'm not an oceanographer, though I have been called as such time and again, simply because I work at an oceanographic institution. I'm an international lawyer by training, and I direct the Marine Policy Center at the Oceanographic Institution. So my colleagues have been at it for 25 years or thereabouts. So they know in principle that it works, that it is possible for carbon to be removed from the atmosphere through the iron fertilization. But what they don't know, what they're trying to find out using the best technology that is available today, is that we can use that technology and scale the operation. Because as you may have heard from the previous session, that the challenge that we have is removing about 10 billion tons of carbon, every year, for us to keep the goal of the Paris Climate Agreement. And that kind of scale up comes with it a lots of unanswered questions. Can we do that? What is the impact in the marine environment? One of the key aspects of the ocean decade is the ocean health. And so how do we make sure that these two match? What we need to do to deal with the climate crisis, and how do we at the same time keep track of the marine, the ocean environment? So the work is underway, but as the previous panel pointed out, it takes time. It is not something that you could carry out in a controlled environment. It is in the open waters. And how do you proceed with it? And my colleagues established what is called Exploring Ocean Iron Solutions, XOIS. And what they tried to do was to bring in number of leading research institutions from around the world. And not only that, they have been having every conversation that they have and every document that is presented in it, whether it is technology specific, whether it is matters that pertain to the climate convention vis-a-vis MRV, or any kind of public comment. They put it all in the open platform, so anybody that is interested can go and see it. And so there are people who agree with it as the only solution and something that we know enough to move forward very rapidly. But then there are those that don't, but all those opinions are there. So trying to be as transparent as possible. I have the distinct honor, Margaret, working with you and Ken Bissler in publishing a short piece on a code of conduct. And so they I believe it was in Nature magazine, and we have since then a more robust document produced by the AGU on the ethical framework. So we need to move forward in bringing the priorities identified by the ocean decade in making the connection with the climate crisis that we have and what the parties here are trying to do. But despite the ocean decade, despite all the effort that we have put in so far, while we see some progress on it, it is still far from where we need to be. To get a mention about a small paragraph in the global stocktake is a significant plus compared with where we were, at the time of the adoption of the climate agreement. So we have a challenge in front of us in terms of the ocean decade and the theme 5, climate, ocean and climate solutions, and what we need to do in the context of this. And the role of technology, the role of public-private partnership is absolutely key, but equally important is ensuring that the public's confidence that what we are doing is, while solving one problem, is not creating other problems. And so that's the challenge we have, and I think again here, the technology will play a huge role. I'll stop there, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you, Rama. So, Lauren, another of the recommendations that Julian sort of summarized for us was to increase research into marine renewable energy, and especially doing this in a way that co-designs governance and operation. So can you speak to this in the context of offshore wind and also monitoring offshore wind installation? And as I asked Robert, many people may not be familiar with Ørsted. So if you could tell people how Ørsted works in this area, that would be helpful too.
You can hear me? Oh, I can hear myself. Good. So Ørsted is a renewable energy company. We're an offshore, onshore renewable energy company. We're the leading offshore wind company in the world. We have 9.6 gigawatts of offshore wind already constructed, and 9.4 gigawatts sort of awarded or in construction at the moment. So this year, in fact, we're building more than in this particular year than we have across our operations. Because of that, we're right at the nexus of climate and biodiversity, and we see it very much as an interconnected challenge. Much for what you were just saying is, we don't want to build renewable energy solutions and then find out that it's upsetting an ecosystem in an adverse way. So we obviously, as a new industry, relatively new industry in the ocean, are very cautious about what those consequences may be. Now, we have done, in all of our work, we obviously do all the required permitting to make sure that our impact is as low as possible. But what we've decided to do is, from 2030, we've taken a biodiversity ambition, which is to all of our projects that we develop from 2030 onwards should have a net positive impact on biodiversity. So it's not just about mitigating any adverse effects, but actually leaving it better off. What that entails, though, is understanding how we measure that and how we can see what are the metrics we use to ensure that that we'd leave it in a better place than before. Again, the other challenge on that is that, of course, marine ecosystems are different in every geography that we operate. We operate in America, in Europe, and APAC. So what we have done to support that, and of course we're involved in many of these engagements where it's crucial that we're working with local stakeholders, with other global stakeholders to make sure that we're all learning together. But we've developed for ourselves a biodiversity measurement framework. It's an 8-step approach. It's available online, and it's essentially our first stab at what does that look like from project conception through development and to operation, on identifying the priority species and habitats, getting baseline data, and using that to map and monitor our impact over time. And we are of the sort of urgent mindset. We don't believe that we have time to waste. So that, as I say, that's published out there, but we are also working with peers of ours across the industry so that we can take ours apart, use it, don't use it, but let's come to a point where we have an agreed upon approach so that we as an industry can contribute back and then also use that data to serve our collective efforts. Maybe just on co-governance, I mean, if we're talking siting and permitting, siting is a wholly government-owned process, and over, by the time sites are awarded or by the time you start operating, those can have changed because of different interactions with other marine industries and ecosystems. But what we do, because we don't intervene directly into that siting process, is to work with stakeholders in academia, in business, etc., to try and advance understanding of what that looks like. So an example is Predict. It's a project that we fund that works with the universities. I've got a University of Aberdeen and the University of Highlands and Islands, which I've never actually heard of myself before. But we work with them to address the knowledge gaps in offshore wind environments, and in particular on fish migration patterns, and predicting what that interaction looks like with wind farms themselves. And then that is a group that publishes that data and makes it available for governments to use to make better decision making around siting. So that's some of the things that we're doing. And
great, thank you. Thank you. So, Evgenia, another theme that Julian discussed was ensuring ocean stewardship, improved ocean literacy, and co-design, again, as for the rest of these, co-designing governance and cooperation. Can you talk about those from the perspective of early career ocean professionals? And because some people may not know about the Early Career Ocean Professionals program, of which you're the global coordinator, maybe you could give us a couple sentences about that too.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And I would like to start as well with saying thanks to Fugro for organizing this and also for inviting me, because it's really very important to be able to share the perspectives of early career ocean professionals. So in fact, for the Vision 2030 process, as Julian was mentioning, there were a lot of experts gathered, and actually several ECOPs were included in each of the working groups. So we did contribute to the writing up of these white papers, which was really a great experience and very valuable one. So our program, which is in short called ECOP program, so ECOP stands for Early Career Ocean Professional. We are one of the first endorsed UN Ocean Decade programs. So we operate officially since 2021, so it's over 3 years now. And we started as an informal working group, so we basically started at the end of 2019. So it's really kind of already 5 years that we are in this field. So just to also mention that for the purpose of our program, the definition of an early career ocean professional, because that might vary across various organizations, but so for our purpose, an early career ocean professional is someone who is working or studying in the marine sector, but having any profession that is related to the anything related to the marine sphere within their 10 years from their last professional education. So we don't have an age gap. So we are not saying that if you're 36 years old, you can't join the program. Like, we are very open. Right, and now back to your question, Margaret. So in the white paper on Challenge 5, so the white paper actually laid out several milestones, and some of these milestones really match what we are doing at the ECO program. So first of all, milestone number 3 is talking about building capacity for ocean decade challenges. And first of all, I need to say that all these white papers and challenges, they are interconnected. And I personally was involved in working group number 9, working on the white paper for capacity development, right, for challenge number 9. And of course, capacity development was mentioned in all the other white papers and all the other 9 white papers, because it's really an overarching theme. So building capacity is really one of the main focal areas of our program. So we do webinars for about 2 years on various topics. We try to be as open and flexible as possible. We did the webinars on absolutely a wide area of topics, from ocean governance, UN Ocean Decade in Africa, the use of underwater technology, the use of drones, ocean literacy in India, like really you name it, like it was really wide area of the topics. Then we, thanks to the support from the IOC, UNESCO and NORAD, 2 years ago we had 2 rounds of online trainings made for ECOP specifically for Africa and Caribbean seas. And now, so we had to do a lot of things online due to the pandemic, and now it was time to move to in-person trainings. So right now, this week, we are having our first in-person training in Malta for ECOPs from all the Mediterranean Sea countries. So we gathered about, I think, 15 ECOPs, and they have a 1-week training now in Malta on oceanographic survey techniques and data management. So we think that it's really a pilot project, and everything goes well. We really hope to continue our in-person trainings there to be able to gather ECOPs for these trainings. And we also have done 4 other online trainings on basically data analysis, data management. And we saw a lot of demand on this, really from many regions. Also, we need to acknowledge the fact that some regions do not have a high level of understanding of English to be able for them to attend those trainings in English. So with this in mind, we also had a specific training for Central America, for example, in Spanish, so that we could have a greater outreach for those ECOPs in that region. Then milestone number 5 of the white paper actually is talking about inclusive stakeholder engagement. And indeed, interdisciplinarity is pivotal for our program. So I was explaining the definition of an ECOP. And we are not only talking about those in academia, because we want to also welcome ECOPs from other professions. Like if you are just an activist or a photographer or a journalist or surfers, or fishermen. This was always the main point of our program, that we do not focus solely on those who have a degree. Because a lot of ECOPs work in NGOs, they don't have a scientific degree, but they're deeply interested in, specifically in ocean literacy, they're deeply interested in contributing to the UN Ocean Decade, to the marine environment. Then milestone number 10 mentioned enhanced utilization of ocean science and knowledge. And this milestone was talking about the number of workshops and trainings that should be increased over the period of the UN Ocean Decade. And so with this in mind, I also have an example how our program approaches this item. So we are now running ocean data webinar series, and you might have heard about it. So this is run by EUMETSAT. We are one of the partners. So this is a joint effort by EUMETSAT, Copernicus Marine Service, EMODNet, and UN Ocean Decade Coordination Office for ocean data sharing. So we thought that, there's ocean data, and then there are UN Ocean Decade challenges. There are 10 challenges. It's all in the implementation plan. So we thought that it would be really useful to show how you can use, where you can find ocean data, how you can use that ocean data to be able to address those 10 UN Ocean Decade challenges. And so we decided to group those challenges and dedicate each webinar to a certain theme across those challenges. So, for example, the next one that we'll be having on the 15th of January will be on ocean-driven solutions for a sustainable economy and resilient communities. So this is pretty much related to what we are talking about today. And then in the white paper also, the authors mentioned ocean literacy as one of the adaptation measures. And for ocean literacy and awareness, they mentioned the need to create databases, and they need to have data on existing and planned ocean literacy activities. So I think this is really a good idea. So we also work a lot with ocean literacy. In fact, ECOPs are deeply interested in ocean literacy. And we had to even create a specific ocean literacy hub for Asia and for Africa, but there is deep interest from other regions as well. So we're also planning to have in-person trainings for ocean literacy only. We had a special ocean literacy event at the UN Ocean Decade conference in Barcelona, together with really a consortium of great partners. And also our ECOPs were participating were supporting the translation of the Venice Declaration. The Venice Declaration was a follow-up on the Venice Conference on Ocean Literacy that happened earlier this year. So I think that indeed this database that the white paper mentions will be really great, because there are so many great initiatives and projects around the world. And it would be really great to be able to share them so that other people could have a look and be inspired and duplicate what someone else has already thought about and doing somewhere else. We were collecting ocean literacy initiatives for that side event and mentioned in Barcelona, and we were really amazed that we had a lot of contributions. We were asking for exactly those examples of ocean literacy projects and initiatives around the world. And people are doing really amazing things. Like they're constructing websites, they're showing the problems to the community, they're doing hikes with children, like really great stuff. So if we could really, according to this recommendation in the white paper, if we could really provide this global database, it would be really amazing. I think I'll stop here, Margaret. Hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to open this up for questions for the panelists from the audience. And if you don't have any, I'll have some.
Thank you, Margaret, for the excellent event, and also thanks to all the panelists for your efforts. My questions will be for Robert, please. You talk about that you have you built your algorithms for habitat mapping. So in this time, the most important thing is the validation for the results you have did. So what you have already had did before for this validation for the data you have collected.
Yeah.
And what kind of validation you have used, like the ground truthing or other modeling or assessment you already had used. And my second question is what you have did for the climate action using these algorithms, like habitat shifting models, or just for recognizing the impacts on the critical habitats. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I'll try to answer this in the least technical way for the audience. So proofing obviously is ongoing because I think 2 days ago we spoke about seagrass, for example, as well, and you do see that there's many different types of seagrass that have different carbon sequestration value or potential, for example. So for example, in the Italian seagrass project, what we do is we sample with hyperspectral data in different habitats, and we cross-check that, we validate that with the data that we get from the different multi-scale technologies, so either from the airborne LiDAR bathymetry or from the satellite-derived bathymetry, for example. So that's the way we do that in that project, but it's an ongoing research of refining the accuracy and the reliability of the technologies that we're using, and we're publishing that as we go along. And obviously in that case we're working for a consortium of academic institutes that will continue doing that work. So that's the way we do that in that space. With the mangrove project that I was talking about, we have a similar collaboration with the Cook University that's actually doing that validation of the health of the mangroves. So that's the way we're doing. And your second part of the question was? Sorry.
The applications you have did under what action? Climate actions, or just for monitoring the habitats?
Yeah, so it's what you see is that it's always a combination nowadays. And the question is, do the governments that commission this work see that combination? You can't. I mean, the data that we collect can and is used for coastal erosion purposes, morphology calculations, as well as biodiversity or habitat degradation or restoration. So the similar type of data sources are used for both applications, which makes it a more attractive business case, I would say.
Other questions? So I have one for Julian. Julian, are you still there?
I am, Margaret.
Julian, the decade has had a couple calls for action since Barcelona, and you've heard from the existing programs as well. Do you see the community shifting toward these priorities that have been set already, or is this something that we're going to have to pay a lot more attention to and sharpen up?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Indeed, in fact, the call that we issued in October was really the first one that kind of reflects those new priorities. So it's a little bit early to tell you whether the community is responding to that, because the call is still open until January, and only then we will be able to see what actions are being put forward by the different stakeholders. But I certainly hope that this will be reflected. But that will also require, that we are very proactive and engage into these different processes, both at the global level, but also within regional frameworks, specifically talking to, for example, biodiversity community or the pollution community, and really trying to steer a little bit the process so that we can see some high-level, flagship initiatives around some of those themes emerging in the coming years. So one area where we are trying to work, for example, is in the area of marine pollution with the Back to Blue initiative, where we are really trying to capture all the recommendations that came out of a Vision 2030 process and develop a global framework, programmatic framework to address this. So that's an example, but indeed, we need to use all the pathways and influence and work across the different communities to translate those global priorities into actions.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Hi there. I'm a student from the U.S. And I'm from a small island off the coast of Maine. And so the ocean health is really important to me. And I'm hoping this question doesn't veer too much from the topic you've been discussing, but I was curious if you had any advice for advocating for ocean health at sort of a local level. I'm thinking if I go back to my small town, because things like sea level rise certainly affects my community, as well as lobstering is a huge economy builder in my community. And so just thinking how can one make change at a local level, advocating for ocean health. Thank you.
Rama.
Thank you for that question. What you asked is really a question that connects with what UNESCO IOC is trying to do with the Ocean Decade Challenge 5 in a very real sense of the term, connecting with people. We, like you, we're not on an island, but we are on the coast, Woods Hole, and we have to be prepared for sea level rise. And we have dock facilities, and every time there is an issue with weather, we have to move all these things back, and and looking forward, what does it take for us to think about it? So I think it also connects with the education part that you're talking about. So we need to be able to get the issue of climate change, climate warming, to people at all levels. Once they know the connection, then they would be able to be more receptive to the kind of solutions that we're talking about. In our case, we have prepared a plan for getting ready for the next 100 years. It's very expensive. It's not easy. How do you build resilience? It's not just about us taking care of our dock facilities. We live on the coast. There are lots of other people, real people living there, businesses living there. So we came up with this public-private partnership with restaurants and other institutions, and us all coming together and then saying what needs to be done. So, it's a larger question. There is one more session on this, I believe on the 16th, so do attend that. But I think the real progress on this Challenge 5, Margaret, is our ability to connect what is happening to the climate system and the impacts in a very real sense to the people at all levels.
Do you have a town council?
So can I add one word?
Do you go to the town council meetings? Great. I think you're part of the solution for your town.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And this, as a market development manager to a degree as well, we are dealing with this question a lot when we talk to local government. And to me, it's really connecting the emotion that people feel about their coast to the data, and to show them in data how that emotion looks like. We had a deputy prime minister of a small island development state that said, as a young boy, 60 years before, 70 years before, I was at this beach and there was a big beach, and now I see a small beach. And we could show them the data of that degradation and also the modeling in the future. Then you connect to the emotion. That's for politicians. And then second, you use the data to build a business case and to show how it will impact, to know and to adapt how that will impact tourism, fisheries, and all the real economy that you can support.
Great, thank you. Well, our time is up, but I think that this panel gave you wonderful perspectives, but really almost everything that you've seen at the Ocean Pavilion is pointed directly on this issue of unlocking ocean-based solutions to climate change. So, Julian, thanks for your leadership at the UN Decade, and we've heard the word from the decade and the people that put together Vision 2030.
Julian, don't go away. There is a group photograph.
I'm here, not going away.